皆さんお待たせをしております。時間になりま
Thank you very much for waiting. It's time, but the speakers and the chairpersons are not ready. So the audience, please have a seat and wait. Thank you for waiting. We'd like to begin the topic 2.
今度のトピックは
The topic 2 is the scientific approach toward dementia prevention and care. This is an important theme which was dealt with in the yesterday's breakout session, and based on what they have discussed, we'd like to hear from the experts. Here, National Center for Geriatric and Gerontology Japan, and Dr. Takao Suzuki, and from UK, King's College London, Dr. Martin Prince will be co-chairing the topic 2. And the panelists and the chairpersons will be taking the stage. And the theme is a scientific approach toward dementia prevention and care. Dr. Suzuki, the floor is yours.
Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a time to start the topic 2, and with the title of Scientific Approach Toward Dementia Prevention and Care. I'm Takao Suzuki from National Center of the Geriatrics and Gerontology, and will be a co-chair with Professor Prince from the King's College of London. And there are 5 speakers and in this session. And yesterday, we had a subspecialty meeting of scientific approach toward dementia prevention and care. So in this session, at first, I would like to review the yesterday's symposium very briefly. And where can I get the slide? Slide processing? スライドはどこでやる?
May I have the slide and how I can manipulate the slide, okay?
Okay. Yesterday, we had, as I told you, 9 speakers, presentator, focusing on the scientific evidence of the prevention of dementia and dementia care. And this slide shows the very basic concept of that session. And there are 2 axes to consider prevention and care of dementia. And one is a time axis from preclinical stage, MCI, clinical, and care stage. And also the other axis is the from basic research and clinical and interventional research to social science research. So there are just presentators covering a very wide range of research activity around the world. And not only G7 countries, but also some Asian countries where they are facing the aged society very rapidly. So from now, I would like to introduce some main points of each presenter yesterday. At first, Professor Prince, it's much better from his report by himself is much better, I think. But anyway, Professor Prince gave us a presentation at first yesterday. And he gave us a talk on global prevalence of dementia in the world and some robust risk factors of dementia so far established. And he emphasized the preventive strategies of dementia through the lifelong modification of lifestyle, as shown in this slide, such as an education in early life, and also hypertension control in middle life, and diabetes control in mid to late life, and also smoking through the lifetime. And he also emphasized that we have to continue our effort to establish other robust risk factors for prevention of cognitive decline and dementia. And then Professor Hachinsky gave us a talk focusing on the pathology and prevention of vascular dementia. As you know, Professor Hachinsky is a pioneer in this field. And his review was focusing on treatable vascular components and risk factor to reduce the prevalence of vascular dementia. And he also proposed 3 steps of interventions, just shown in this slide. The first is identification of risk factors, and second, enhancing motivation, and third, involvement in the society. For example, the education of the control of blood pressure, or etc., in school or work. And also supported by IT technology should be very important. And social media environment. So he proposed these steps for the interventions of for the prevention of vascular dementia through the lifetime. And also, Professor Yanagisawa, he is his major concern is the pathology of Alzheimer diseases in the brain, and he gave us a talk of preemptive therapy in preclinical stage of Alzheimer diseases yesterday. He showed major research question in this research area. That is, how should we know the pathological change before clinical onset? And he showed some solutions, and there are two examples. And one is, at present, amyloid PET is really strong weapons to know the pathological changes at the preclinical stage of the Alzheimer diseases. However, it costs very much, very expensive, about $500 per one examination. And another one, which is now developing, is by simple blood test with very low cost. He says it's just 10 cents per one examination. So the cost effectiveness is really nice. But it's just ongoing research, and in a week or two, the detailed method and data will be present, will be open in the public. So next slide is Professor Shimada, and Dr. Shimada introduced the randomized control trial for the MCI elderly living in the community in Japan. And they developed the Cognisize as a very strong intervention tool for the prevention of the cognitive decline of the elderly people. And this randomized control trial showed that such an Cognisize or brain stimulating with exercise is really effective to prevention to prevent the decline of cognitive functions among the elderly people. Also, there are two professors from China. One is Professor Chen from Taiwan, and also Professor Piu Chan from Beijing, China. And Professor Chen from Taiwan introduced their trials of dementia prevention and its related policy in Taiwan. And he now organized their nationwide randomized control trial to validate the clinical effects using integrated intervention programs, as shown here, physical activities, cognitive training, dietary counseling, and also chronic disease management. And they are now planning to develop a social marketing strategy based on these scientific trials. And also, Professor Chan from Beijing, China, also introduced their current status of dementia and challenging issue, including the construction of big data through the whole country of China. And from now, there are three presentators we had yesterday's session, and their major concern is the sociological treatment or sociological aspects for the care of the demented person. And Professor Brucker, she is now a leader of person-centered care established by Dr. Tom Kitwood, as shown in the slide. And the gist of person-centered care she presented was, as shown here, BIPs, values people, individual needs, and perspective of service user, and supportive social psychology. And she also introduced some intervention results regarding the improvement of quality of life and also reduction of antipsychotic medications. And then Dr. Stoke, he also mentioned about the person-centered care for the elderly person, for demented person, and particularly focusing on the reduction program of medication by effective training programs, which reduce the number of residents with dementia in care homes prescribed psychotic medications too. And final presenter in yesterday's session, Professor Kazui, and he stressed the needs for collaboration among the many people caring for demented patients living at home. And he published the collaboration notebook to make a good achievement for these needs. The collaboration notebook, including the patient's clinical information to share among the stakeholders, is really a good product, and the collaboration notebook is for support of demented elderly living at home. So I have reviewed of the yesterday session very briefly. And so from now, based on these yesterday's presentation and the discussions and the knowledges, from now, we would like to have today's session. And today's session at first, Professor Harayama will give us a talk. Professor Harayama is now a Council of Science, Technology and Innovation and Cabinet Office from Japanese government. So please, Professor Harayama, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Yuka Harayama. I'm executive member of the Council for Science, Technology and Innovation. This council is chaired by the Prime Minister, and our task is really support the government to formulate science, technology, innovation policy, and also not only formulating policy, but helping them to implement these recommendations, including health issues. As Professor Suzuki described yesterday's discussion, we are fully committed to really go in this direction for the prevention and care of Alzheimer and other dementia. What we can learn from yesterday's discussion is that to address dementias, we have to have really a strategy going to the more multidisciplinary approach, transdisciplinary approach, and also gathering all stakeholders, not only medical staff, but also you have to have all the engaged people, including civil society, caregivers, and also patients themselves. So all together, and we have to think about how to mobilize all these people. To do that, from the point of view of science, technology, innovation, we have to have an approach not only based on the triple helix, but quadruple helix. That means the collaboration among governments, universities, academia, business people, and civil society people together. So I will shortly describe how we organize at the government level. As I mentioned, at the council, we are within cabinet office. And then we try to really give the big picture of what we have to do in terms of science, technology, innovation. And for that, we have a tool. We call it Science Technology Basic Plan, running for 5 years. Actually, we are on the 4th basic plan, and we are starting to prepare the 5th basic plan, covering 2016 to 2020. So we can see that, foresee that the aging will be the critical issues for the next round of basic plan. And our approach is not only focused on high-tech issues. technology is one aspect, but we have to have more broader view of science, technology, and innovation. That's our point of view. Usually, the care system and prevention is under the responsibility of Ministry of Health, but our approach is also to gather other ministries' strengths, including Ministry of Science, Technology, and Education, MEXT, and also Ministry of Economy, Trade, and Industry, business side. And the trial for us is really to formulate together our policy. I would like to mention some new issues here on the Japanese health landscape, because since last year, we are underway to discuss how to really better use of taxpayer money in terms to have a more concentration, prioritization in terms of healthcare. And finally, we arrived to the conclusion to set up a new funding agency focusing on health issues. We call it Japan Agency for Medical R&D, in short, AMAID, which will take starting the operational next April. So this new tool will be helpful to really have a direct investment in terms of medical care, including dementia and aging things. Beside these approaches, I come back to the chart presented by Professor Suzuki to dimension, care prevention, and also basic research and more clinical research and including social approaches. These 4 dimensions where we can intervene in terms of science, technology, and innovation. I say all of them. Of course, basic research is fundamental and funded by the government. It's critical. But also, we have to take care of the implementation of therapy and all care system. That means we have to integrate social science approaches. And that is quite new for Japanese context because we are working in silo in some sense. And make them work together is very difficult task, but we have to address these challenges. Also, in terms of prevention and care, I say, we need to have power of science, technology, and innovation. For example, prevention, we need to have evidence-based approach to take actions. For that, we need to have very, as I said, interdisciplinary approach to bring evidences. And for care system, we need to take advantage of advancement of ICT, some called e-health. And behind all these approaches, we have to accumulate information, data, and we have to not only gather information, but share information. For that, we have a tool today to really exploit the power of big data in general and terms, but in particular, it's so critical to take advantage of the big data and analytics applied in the field of dementia and Alzheimer. For that, the one approach at the national level, it's not sufficient. And all of us recognize the importance to have the common understanding of the problem, common approach to really to act together. And to do that, we can start with sharing information. That means we are talking about open access, open data system, and some of developed countries, they're already taking some actions. And we have to have the same common view on that because we need to have kind of standardization and common practice regulation. And for that, I encourage all of you, and including myself, to take action moving in this direction. So to have a practical cases applied in Alzheimer and dementia is really a beautiful case because all of us, we have to address anyway. And the time is not forever, but we have to act quickly as soon as possible because we have to make so much step to do front of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Harayama, for a wonderful presentation that show the government strategy for the scientific research concerning about dementia. Thank you so much. And next speaker is Professor Mori. He is now the professor of Osaka City University School of Medicine. And he will give us some basic research on some dementia. Please, Professor Mori.
鈴木先生、ご紹介ありがとうございます。
Thank you very much for your very kind introduction, Professor Suzuki. The title of my presentation is Efficient Prevention of Dementia Based on Medical Evidence and a Financial View. The number of people living with dementia, according to last year's report, it's over 4 million. It's a lot of people. And in 2010 already in the US, the number exceeded 5 million mark. And towards 2050, the number increases to 13.5 million, according to one forecast. The issue of dementia is very big. And then there are two important issues, in my opinion. One is people living with dementia or patients, and then another is the family members' sufferings. And the thing is that people living with dementia, they cannot fight against this disease together with the family members. This is a very important characteristic of this condition. And the number of patients itself is a problem because of the care cost and a very high health care cost. At this point in time already in the US, 20 trillion yen spent was made. Here in Japan, it's 15 trillion. And if we continue with this curve, of course, we'll be bust completely. So that's why, according to this title, if we can delay the onset of disease by 5 years, what happens? So as you can see with another curve here, which is the blue, the number of people living with dementia can be reduced by 40%. So this was a prediction reported back in 2010 already. So how can we reduce the number of patients? And of course, we have to address the issues of lifestyle-related diseases and improvement of exercise and etc., etc. There are many factors to be addressed, but then we need to also go after efficiency. And a more surer way of going about it is to develop good medicine, of course. So what is the status of development of new medicine in this sphere? Actually, the situation is not that bright. So for MCI, the only approach which has statistical significance is here. US FDA said we should develop medicine not only for full-fledged or full-blown dementia patients, but also for those patients who are still at a very early stage with mild cases. Or even further, even before onset, those people can be addressed with some kind of medication. So this was already proposed by US FDA in 2013. This is a very, very new proposal, I guess. So this is a new paradigm shifting from treatment to prevention. I think this is probably the most important message which has been communicated by US FDA in this area of health condition. So how can we provide treatment to those people who are even before onset? So pre-onset. We never know whether the onset will be tomorrow or in 1 year. We don't know. But then this has been clarified by the research called ADONI research. On the horizontal axis it's time, and on the vertical axis is biomarker abnormality. This was published in Lancet Neurology, ADONI study. This is normal people, this is MCI, and eventually this is dementia. This is the cascade, and before symptoms of dementia are seen, what kind of tests are available for early diagnosis, MRI, FDG PET, and also cerebrospinal fluid. So those can be used. And in yesterday's breakout session, we discussed this, more specifically amyloid PET, which is presented by red line here. This is the test method which is most sensitive and most reliable right now, and it's drawing a lot of attention. So before onset, what is the timing we will see certain changes? That was studied by Diane study. Even 20 years before the onset, there is some kind of pathological change in the brain already. So Dr. Bateman from Washington University of Diane study was published here, and amyloid PET shows the brain at the onset. This is 5 years before, 10 years before, and this is 20 years before. Meaning that this amyloid imaging, if we can obtain this, we can predict the onset of this disease in 5 years, for instance, with a pretty good certainty. And this will give us some idea of when to start medication. So what kind of medications are available right now? With this slide, I'd like to cover that topic. These ones in black, that's our ADONI project and Diane study. These are observational studies. Light blue ones, the A4 study and Diane and Banner and API studies. In all of these clinical research, new drugs were tested, different from the concept of the older drugs. So with these new drugs, these are the studies that are ongoing right now. Some of the projects have been just planned and not been carried out yet. But then these are the new approaches that are emerging this year, last year, and this year. These are really at the forefront of the medicine in the United States. But here in Japan also, since about 5 years ago, here in Japan we also started ADONI project and the Diane study also this year in 2014. Actually, the Ministry of Health gave us an approval to promote this Diane study as well in Japan. So Japan is making great effort to catch up with the US in this respect. So these advanced medicine, there may be some progress out there, but what is the actual clinical status right now? We have 4.62 million patients of dementia here in Japan, and there are 100,000 GPs seeing these patients. It's not all GPs in Japan, but as Professor Dr. Yokokura presented yesterday, we are hoping that there will be higher involvement of GPs in Japan, involvement in dementia. As you can see here at the bottom of this page, what is suggested is that the two societies in Japan are training to foster dementia specialized doctors. Right now, 1,800 doctors have completed this training, and those specialist dementia doctors can actually provide some support to the GPs working out in the field. So this is pretty characteristics here in Japan, and this will bring about a higher diagnosis rate and a higher accuracy of diagnosis. And we now have very precise treatment guidelines available here in this country. This is my last slide. So this clinical stage is within this red circle, early, middle, and late phases. And then medicine and social care put together, this combination is where we are good at here in Japan, but we are a little bit lagging behind medical challenge, which is really advanced medicine, including preventive medicine. So this is where we want to spend our effort. And for dementia care, we need to have seamless care. So this terminal care is very important, including tube feeding and also real terminal care. I don't think any country has made great progress on this front. So actual clinical practice and medical challenge or advanced medicine, all of these need to generate evidence towards the terminal care, because all that end well is good. So with that, I would like to conclude my presentation. Thank you very much.
森先生どうもありがとうございました。
Dr. Mori, thank you. You talked extensively the results of the state-of-the-art research in the world and in Japan.
And from now, Professor Prince will be a chair for other three presentators.
Thank you. So it's my pleasure to introduce the next speaker, who is Professor Philippe Amuel, and he is the General Director of the Fondation Plan Alzheimer from France, and he works at the Hôpital Universitaire at Lille, and he's also a specialist in epidemiology and molecular epidemiology with a particular interest in cardiovascular disease and dementia. Philippe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like first to thank the organizer of this incredible meeting just to invite me to present some ideas around what collaboration across countries in research could be. I will discuss what is called actually joint programming. And this joint programming initiative is based on three main pillars. The first one is the shared visions, where countries engage voluntarily and on a viable geometry, that is, they don't have to participate in any or all of the event, which is based, in fact, to tackle a major societal challenge. This societal challenge has been defined by a specific group as the European Commissions, and neurodegenerative disease and Alzheimer's in particular have been identified as a major challenge for Europe. The second point, which is important in this joint programming initiative, is a management structure. It should be light, it should be as efficient as possible, and intended toward to tackle this societal challenge. The third point, which is not the least, is a common strategic research agenda that needs to be defined. And with this three pillars, you can begin to help to what we call defragment research. That is, the fragmented research within different smaller countries can be clearly efficiently improved by these defragmentations. So the clear point is that we cannot tackle neurodegenerative disease by acting as single countries. And that's why GPND is now one of the largest global ND research initiatives, which is led by countries themselves, with 28 participating countries, with, in yellow, their EU member state, associated countries, and third countries just like Canada or Switzerland. And what's interesting is that all this has one goal, which is to increase the coordination of national research programs to try to improve their impact and effectiveness. The GPND goals are relatively simple. You know them all along. It's really to tackle the challenge of AD and other neurodegenerative disease by developing new treatment and preventive strategies, but also improving health and social care approaches. The point which is also an important element of this action is to raise awareness and destigmatize neurodegenerative disorders. And finally, to alleviate the economic and social burden of this disease. The idea of GPND is really to bring together the researchers, not only basic researchers, but also clinical and healthcare and social researchers, national funding bodies, and national research strategies and investment. So we are speaking about neurodegenerative disease in GPND. This concept covers, of course, Alzheimer's disease and related disorders, Parkinson's disease, prion disease, motor neuron disease, Huntington disease, spinocerebellar ataxia, and spinal muscular atrophy. And most of the expenses and research are devoted to Alzheimer's in a proportion of 70% almost. The scope of this GPND is research, research, and research in all the different fields. That is basic research with all that's around animal models, cohorts, disease pathology, medical and translational research with early diagnosis, prevention, clinical trial, and last but not least, social research with healthcare delivery, home automation, health economics, and ethics. These defragmentations, which is what GPN is all about is based on two main elements. First, the strategic resource agenda, and second, an alignment of countries on common research goals. This agenda of research has been launched in February 7, 2012, and accepted and prepared by all the countries participating at that moment in the initiatives. And we have 5 major priorities, 10 enabling technologies. So about the priorities, we have, of course, the origin of the disease, the mechanisms, the models, the definitions, but also, as you can see, the idea to develop strategy in therapeutics, but also prevention and interventions. And of course, one of the major elements is healthcare and social research. Just to give you an idea of the implementation of the strategic research agenda since the last 4 years, we have, for instance, calls for proposals based on virtual common pot. That is the money stay in the country, but all the other elements are common. A common review board, a common call, a common dissemination of this information. Just to give you an example, during the last 4 years, we launched 5 new calls. Ones were really brand new. We just got the results last week about preventive strategies. But you see, we are addressing all the major elements. The first one, which is a pilot one, was addressing the optimization of biomarkers, because we speak a lot of biomarkers, but not everybody agrees on these definitions of biomarkers and results. We have also another initiatives in this GPND, which is what we call the Center of Excellence in Neurodegeneration, which is led by my good friend Pierluigi Nicotera in Germany, and allows different excellence centers to work together to exchange and to better participate in collaborative projects. Just to give you an idea of the statistics around these calls, you can see that the number of total proposals we received was 213, with a requested budget of 157 million euros. Finally, the number of proposals supported was 30, with 60 million euros coming from all these different countries. That is a success rate of 18%, just to translate the quality of this research and the need we have in these research fields. Just to give you an idea and the flavor of this is our last call, which was intended to support preventive strategies. And we supported 5 big projects. All these projects are international, based on international cooperations. We have, for example, MIND-AD, which is a multi-modal preventive trials for Alzheimer's disease toward multinational strategies. We have neuroexercise, the effect of an extensive exercise program on the progression of mild cognitive impairment. All these different programs are based on state-of-the-art methodology and just try to make the research improve and give informations and new measurements elements. What is also a consequence of this is we try to encourage deeper level of collaborations, and we are using social networks. So we set up with Induct GP Online partnering tools where scientists can work by groups, by ideas and exchange. And the other point is that each of our call is announced very far in advance. For instance, we're announcing now the call of next January to allow the researcher to begin networking and to be ready when we will launch the call to be able to answer on a very positive manner. We have also in these actions what we call alignment groups, how to align our research strategies. We have different groups dedicated to national strategy, basic, but we have also action groups or alignment groups based on very specific questions, and I identify 2 of them. One is assisted living technology, and the other one is palliative care, which is an important question where research is a bit lacking. All these action groups deliver recommendations, and based on the recommendations, DP&D countries just try to support new axes of research. Just to give you an example, Assisting Living Technology is a program which is run by the European Commission in different countries, and in these different calls they have had on chronic conditions, self-serve society, home care, occupation in life, we have identified 30 programs which are focused on dementia among the 150 AAL projects funded, really for innovation for future. On the other hand, one of our latest action group is about palliative and end-of-life care for neurodegenerative disease. It's clearly a question which has not been efficiently addressed until now, and it's really distinct from cancer palliative care. It needs advanced care planning, family involvement. It's related with cognition problems, difficult prognostications, and it raises important challenge: how to shape palliative care through stage of disease, place of care, key transitions more generally, how to optimize care delivery through appropriate timing and integration of experience. This action group has been met in June, if you remember, in the Netherlands under the auspices of Jacqueline Hoogedam, who was present there. So the last point, which is our partnership with European Commissions, and the idea is really to establish a program of co-investments based on these scientific programations to increase and leverage the value of these investments. We have synergies between GPND actions and Horizon 2020 programs. We had the chance to have during the first call of Horizon 2020 in December 2013, what is called an ERANET call fund. That is, we will launch our call as usually, and the European Commissions will help us to co-fund this with a top-up funding that can raise 33% of the amount which is put by the different countries. And these calls will be issued in the end of 2014, beginning 2015. We just announced it. If you remember, we want researchers just begin partnering now. Today, sorry, because there's jet lags in Europe. So tomorrow, yes, tomorrow it will be on our website, just to announce that to the researchers to prepare for this course. It will cover 3 main topics: identification of genetic, epigenetic, and environmental risk, longitudinal cohorts, and advanced experimental models. Just to conclude, if you can see that from G7 to GPND, we have a shared visions, and most of the countries who are participating to G7s are also participating in GPND, and we are really open to new participation from US and Japan. And if you want to keep updated with all what we do, you can visit our website, sign up for our GPND news feeds, email us, and follow us on Twitter. Thank you for your attention.
So thanks very much indeed, Philip, for that inspiring account of how countries combining together can both be very strategic, but can also bring very large sums of research funding to bear to answer some of the big questions that countries on their own may not be able to address. So thank you for that. I'd like now to move to the next speaker, and he needs a little introduction, I think, but Yves Jeannette, who is the Scientific Director of CIHR Institute of Aging and Professor of Cognitive Neurosciences and Aging at the University of Montreal in Canada.
Thank you so much, Dr. Prince, and both chairmen. Canada is certainly a very strong supporter of what you heard in terms of collaborative research. And I would like to compliment the presentation by Professor Amouyel in order to share with you how we see the extent to which we need this integrated collaborative approach. And we are also very, very aware of the challenge, as you heard all since the beginning of this conference and through all the figures. One thing that I would like you to focus on is the projection, not only in G8 countries where we will have more than double the number of dementia by 2050, but in low and middle income countries as well, where it will more than quadruple. And I think this is something that we did not stress enough probably since the beginning of this meeting, and that we have to address. And Canada is very, very aware of this. And that's why the challenge that we're facing, we are deeply convinced that it's a very global challenge. Now we heard, and I will use a slide very similar to Dr. Mori, where we see the course of the disease. And the approach we have is to go from prevention to care and to support research on how to prevent the disease to occur, how to delay the clinical manifestation through dementia of the diseases causing dementia, and also on how to provide quality of life and maintain social participation. And our strategy to support research on dementia in Canada covers all this. Now, we had, of course, at the Canadian Institute of Health Research, a series of programs addressing independently each of these aspects. The point we wanted to make with the new approach we just integrated recently is to have researchers from all these aspects work together above and over what they're doing in each of their field. So bring disciplines together, have a collaborative effort bringing together all the researchers from the different universities in Canada, from the Pacific to the Atlantics, to bring together researchers from all the neurodegenerative diseases, as Professor Amouyel says, because these different diseases are in fact a large continuum of diseases and they inform each other. And of course, from purely proteomics and genetics aspects to the social aspects, and bringing them as well with partners, stakeholders, including industry, including patients' associations, including policymakers, in order to really focus the effort on the real needs. And this is how we introduced the Canadian Consortium on Neurodegeneration on Aging. More than 360 of the Canadian researchers brought together in a single space. They have support in each of the research they're doing, but they're reunited now in a very collaborative, integrated manner. Dr. Berkman yesterday, for those who were at his presentation, showed this slide, which exemplifies the 20 teams that are making this consortium. And as you see, there's very basic science, but also basic science linked with lifestyle and nutrition and exercise, so bringing together all the aspects of prevention and the mechanisms. There's also the secondary prevention, and Dr. Ashinsky presented on the vascular dimension, and we believe it's very important, so there's a team there. There's also cognitive activity and rehabilitation that can prevent and delay the disease itself in an integrated manner. And then there's a very important dimension on care, where aspects of gerontology are looked at, aspects of the integration of the health system, how to best have and deploy a health system. And Dr. Bergman, in fact, yesterday shared with you a community primary care-based delivery process to people with dementia in at least one of the jurisdictions of Canada. But there's also a very practical thing, like driving in dementia. Which is a very important aspect and question in a large country like Canada, where if you lose your driving abilities, you lose your social connectivity, in fact. And there's also very specific aspects for the Indigenous and Aboriginal population of Canada, where dementia resonates in a very different way than in the rest of the population. I want to mention that there's a number of transversal topics to all this effort. And one important aspect is women in dementia, and I don't think this has been mentioned enough here, that 2/3 of people with dementia are women. And the Canadian Consortium has committed itself to have gender and sex integrated in all the research throughout the consortium, including in the animal models, in order to better understand this gender and sex-specific difference. There's also a number of platforms, so I would be happy to describe this furthermore, but for the respect of the time here, I just wanted to give you a taste and a flavor here. But that's not enough. And organizing our country, we thought, was not enough. And that's why we strongly believe in the JP&D approach, among others, that was just described, because we are also supporting very strong collaboration with the rest of the world. And you have here the programs we're involved at this point. There is the JP&D as well as the Cohen program with Europe. There is program with the United States. There is also, we have joint support for research of Canadian researchers as well as Chinese researchers, and we hope to extend this to other countries, and we do want to extend this to Japan, and I will be happy to discuss this in the future with the new organization that is being put in place. And these research are not only on very basic aspects, these are examples of research, and one example is, for instance, research on caregivers. And this research was specifically on the special needs of caregivers to young onset dementia, which is a very specific aspect, but shows, again, the importance of collaborative structures. Now, doing research is one thing, providing evidence is one thing, disseminating this evidence is another thing, and having this evidence available to the public, to clinicians, to policymakers is very important. One of the aspects, as an example, is that integrated in this Canadian consortium, there is a dissemination arm, which is called the Canadian Dementia Knowledge Transfer Network. And this takes form, among others, in a website, which gives access to all the information and gives access to very practical support for the caregivers, for people with dementia to empower themselves, but also to clinicians to better evaluate, and also to policymakers. At the Canadian Institute of Health Research, we also have other programs, including what we call the Best Brain Exchange. So any government or jurisdiction in Canada, let's say a Minister of Health of Ontario, who wants to know better how to treat and to deploy a program to dementia, could ask us. We bring them Canadian and international experts for a full day of discussion and provide them with the informing evidence for them to make the best policy-making decisions. So just wanted to share with you that we strongly believe in collaboration, integration, and we're welcome all of you to collaborate more with the Canadian researchers. Thank you so much.
So thank you very much, Yves, for that very interesting explanation of the very forward-looking Canadian approach that I'm sure many other countries can learn from. And I think there's particular interest in the knowledge transfer network and the possibility perhaps of internationalizing that as well. So it's my pleasure now to introduce the last speaker before some closing remarks from myself, and that is Dr. Yasuyoshi Ouchi from Toranomon Hospital, where he is, I believe, the president. Dr. Ouchi.
Okay. Thank you very much for the introduction, so Professor Martin and Dr. Suzuki, ladies and gentlemen. So I'm a chairperson of the Japan Geriatric Society. So on behalf of the society, I would like to talk on the role of geriatricians in management of dementia from the viewpoint of lifestyle modification. So as already, some doctors have mentioned. So first of all, so I would like to introduce some about the Japan Geriatric Society. So Japan Geriatric Society is established in 1959. It's only one scientific society in Japan which organizes the research in the field of geriatric medicine, so dementia, osteoporosis, atherosclerosis, infectious diseases, and geriatric syndromes such as frailty. They also aims at conducting research towards the construction of better long-term care for the elderly. And so a number of members is at present 6,500, and annual society meeting, educational seminars for practitioners and medical students, and publishes two journals. One is Japanese and one is English, Geriatrics and Gerontology International. So the impact factor is in 2012, so more than 2. So, and also JGS approves board certified geriatricians. So now we have 1,500 in all over Japan. And the important one is, so JCS considers that the role of geriatricians in dementia practice is the management of lifestyle and lifestyle-related diseases, including hypertension, diabetes, dyslipidemia, which possibly accelerates the development of not only vascular dementia, but also Alzheimer's disease. So there are three kinds of risk factors for Alzheimer's disease. So number one is unpreventable risk factors, so including aging, menopause, family history, and genetic factors. And number two is medical risk factors, including depression, head trauma, hypothyroidism, and hypertension, diabetes, dyslipidemia. So these three are called lifestyle-related disease. And also, so lifestyle, so including diet, smoking, alcohol intake, exercise. So lifestyle itself is known to be a risk factor for Alzheimer's disease. So what about what lifestyle is good for preventing Alzheimer's disease? So already, so many doctors have already mentioned, but regarding diet. So the more fish intake and more vitamin C and E intake is effective for preventing Alzheimer's disease, and regular exercise is also good, and so communication and intellectual performances, reading books, chess play, music play, and so on. So Professor Ueki in Jiu Medical School and so our group coordinately surveyed the content of daily foods in Alzheimer's disease and compared to those in non-Alzheimer's disease subjects. And so found that fish intake, so milk intake, so vegetable intake, and fungi intake, and seaweed intake are significantly less in Alzheimer's patients. This is Professor Ueki, and this is myself, so 40 years ago. So we are the classmates of medical school. So he conducted dietary intervention to Alzheimer's disease. So adequate calorie intake, so sufficient vitamin and mineral intake, and fatty acids control. And fish should be taken at over 60 to 90 grams per day, and vegetable 100 grams per day, and fruit at least once a day. And so he found that he followed up the two groups, so diet modified group and control group. So the number of subjects are not so big, but in the control group, so the cognitive function declined significantly for 30 months, 2 years and a half. But in diet modified group, so the cognitive function remained similar, at least until 30 months. So this result indicates that the dietary modification is effective for developing or accelerating Alzheimer's disease cognitive function. So recently, Lil Jones reported that in the effect of vitamin D deficiency for the occurrence of all-cause dementia and Alzheimer's disease. And so they found that in patients, in subjects with the vitamin D is severely deficient, so the all-cause dementia and Alzheimer's disease prevalence are more. But to get the conclusion, we have to do RCT. And regarding the exercise, Dr. Yamada and Arai in Kyoto University has investigated the relationship between the steps per day and cognitive function. And so they found that patients with mild to moderate Alzheimer's disease, if the patients walk less than 3,000 steps per day, the cognitive decline was significant. But the patients who walks more than 500 steps per day, so the cognitive function stays similar, stays the same. So this clearly shows that regular exercise, even the very light exercise, such as just walk, is effective. So regarding the smoking, the Ikeda in Japan has reported that the risk of the current smokers ranges from 2.2 to 2.0 0 to 2.4 for total dementia and dementia with history of stroke and dementia without history of stroke. And so, interestingly, the risk of ex-smokers decreases from 2.2 to 2.3 to 1.15. So the smoking cessation might be effective in preventing the occurrence of Alzheimer's disease. And as you can see here, if the smokers smoked 1 pack per day, so the risk further increases. So the hypertension, diabetes, dyslipidemia, obesity, so all are well-known risk factors for atherosclerosis. But so these have been reported to be risk factors also for Alzheimer's disease. And moreover, so treatment of lifestyle-related disease has been reported to decrease the incidence of Alzheimer's disease. So this is the first report indicating that the treatment of hypertension is effective for preventing occurrence of Alzheimer's disease. So the systolic hypertension patients was treated by nitrogen calcium antagonist, and they found that the incidence of Alzheimer's disease became half. And also, treatment of diabetes is also the similar observation has been reported. This is a meta-analysis, and so combines the progressive shape and height. So the significant reduction of dementia has been reported, so 13%. But mechanism, why or how the lifestyle modification or the treatment lifestyle-related diseases is effective for preventing Alzheimer's disease is not known. And we are now conducting basic research regarding this issue, the crosstalk between vascular cells and the neuronal cells by using a co-culture system. This is the human umbilical vein endothelial cell, vascular cells, and PC12 cells, a model of neuronal cells. And the HUBEC, the senescence of the HUBEC is produced by some maneuver. So surprisingly, so the PC12 cells becomes senescent. So the blue color indicates senescence-associated beta-galactosidase activity, and so the stained blue. So, and in this condition, so in the vascular endothelial cells, many genes for inflammatory cytokines have been expressed. So our hypothesis is, so the vascular senescence or damage, so that promotes neuronal senescence or damage by secretion of inflammatory cytokines. So in conclusion, so lifestyle modification is important for the prevention of both vascular and Alzheimer's dementia. Although evidence is not concrete, lifestyle-related diseases, especially diabetes and hypertension, should be well treated for the prevention of both types of dementia. And basic research on the mechanism underlying the effect of lifestyle modification or treatment of lifestyle-related diseases may provide a new preventive and therapeutic approach for Alzheimer's disease. So finally, so I'd like to mention about the perspective of dementia practice from the geriatric point of view. So the prevention, so diagnosis and treatment at early stage, and long-term care. So the seamless coordination is important. And regarding the insight from whole body to brain, control vascular risk factors are very important. And insight from brain to whole body, the treatment and care for geriatric syndrome, including aspiration pneumonia, osteoporosis, and frailty, is very important. And treatment and care of complicated diseases in demented patients. So the three specialization doctors, geriatricians, neurologists, and psychiatrists are involved in the dementia practice. But I think that these three kinds of doctors have their own roles in the dementia practice, and you have to these three doctors should coordinate. And also medical and care and social welfare should coordinate. So thank you very much for attention.
Okay, thank you, Professor Ouchi. And now I have closing remarks with the summary of this session by Professor Prince. Professor Prince, please.
So I don't know if it's fair to call it a summary. Since I was asked to prepare a presentation, I have a short presentation if there are the slides there. Still excellent, good. But I think hopefully it may still serve as a little bit of a summary of some of the things that have been discussed both in yesterday's session and today's session, but I think also perhaps a summary of some of the important things that haven't been discussed. So one of the things that I think we haven't focused on so much is what many in the public health field would understand by prevention, which is the primary prevention of dementia. So not the very early detection and diagnosis and treatment of Alzheimer's disease, possibly not even secondary prevention through identification of high at-risk groups, such as those with cardiovascular risk factors or frailty, and concentrated multimodal effective geriatric management and care. So I think with the clinical background that we've had very strongly represented in yesterday's meeting and today's meeting, there's been a large focus on that. But I think we need an uplifting message to give to everybody out there that dementia is a preventable condition. And we need to work out what is the message, and we need to message that message and think about how it needs to be nuanced for different age groups, different cultures, and countries at different stages of health, social, and economic development. So just again to give a quick plug, because Mark Wertman, the Executive Director of Alzheimer's Disease International, has reminded me to say that he has a large stack of this year's World Alzheimer Report that we have recently issued, which is available free of charge here to everybody in the room. And we believe this report to be the most comprehensive, the most critical and up-to-date review of all of the evidence on modifiable risk factors with which to inform population public health, brain health promotion and dementia prevention strategies. So please, if you're interested to look at that, we feel, having sifted through all of the evidence, that this is essentially the the message, that as we've heard, dementia is a life course phenomenon as far as its etiology is concerned. And so prevention activities need to be started absolutely at the beginning of life to foster healthy brain development through healthy fetal nutrition, child nutrition, and in particular education. And then through the prevention of cardiovascular disease and the more active detection and treatment and management of cardiometabolic disorders. Hypertension needs to be picked up early and treated in midlife, but diabetes and smoking, certainly there's effective prevention there in midlife, but as we've heard from the last speaker, even in late life, giving up smoking seems to actually reduce the risk of the onset of dementia. So that's the message, but how do we actually message this? So I think the first incredibly powerful message is that dementia is a preventable condition. And this is so important and so consistent with some of the advocacy messages that we've been putting out about early diagnosis and treatment. First of all, the myth busting. Dementia is not an inevitable normal part of aging. It's a disease, and we understand its risk factors, and it's actually preventable. And it isn't the case that there is nothing we can do. We can prevent it, and if we can detect it early, we can provide treatment and care. The next thing that stems from this message that dementia is preventable is that it's everybody's business, because it's a life course condition. It's never too early to start preventive intervention measures. And so children and young people need to engage with the notion that they have a strong expectation of reaching late life, and they will have a certain risk of developing dementia, and they should be concerned about that. And we need to think how to package that message to them so that it influences their behaviors across the life course. And it's also never too late. So the notion that I've smoked all of my life and it's never going to make a difference, we need to get older people engaged with these prevention activities as well, because things that they do and decisions that they take and the way that as societies we help them to take those decisions is going to have an important impact upon their dementia risk. So first of all, dementia is a preventable condition. We need to understand that this is not at all widely understood out there. If we take, for example, the UN Special Assembly 2 years ago on non-communicable diseases, there is no mention of aging in the entire document. There's only one very brief mention of dementia, just an acknowledgement that dementia is an important contributor to non-communicable disease burden. The entire focus is on cancer, on cardiovascular disease, stroke and myocardial infarction and diabetes and their prevention. Now, actually, the current agenda, the dominant agenda within that NCD process, which is for tobacco control, reducing salt in diet, reducing alcohol intake, promoting activity, and better management of cardiovascular risk factors, is probably exactly what we need to be doing for dementia. But dementia needs to be highlighted in there as one of the key conditions that can be prevented. Now, why is it important that dementia is in there? Well, I think one of the really important reasons is that the cost savings, if we can prevent dementia, are actually much greater than the cost savings if we can prevent early mortality from cancer, cardiovascular disease, stroke and diabetes. And governments need to understand that because it's going to energize their activities. I think the next reason is that there may be specific things that you might want to do. I noted that the Labour Party, the opposition in the UK, has recently announced that they're going to introduce a super tax on tobacco company profits of £100 million per year in order to fund more rapid cancer diagnostic tests. Now, actually, if we think this through, smoking actually probably contributes about 13% attributable risk to the incidence of dementia. And in the UK, the societal cost of dementia is somewhere in the order of 24 to 26 billion pounds. 13% of 24 to 26 billion pounds is about another 3 billion pounds per year. Should the UK government be considering putting on a super tax on tobacco companies' profits in order to pay for the social care for dementia as well as the health care for dementia that people's smoking habits are causing? Now, this would be obviously a very provocative thing to do, but it would very clearly make a link in people's minds between smoking behaviour and dementia and the potential that they could change their individual behaviour in order to change their dementia risk. So the final two messages with this, it's never too early. I think with younger people, we probably need to be talking about brain health promotion rather than dementia prevention. We need to get everyone to recognise the importance of education as a source of cognitive and brain reserve. And we need to understand that there is no limit, apparently, to the extent to which education can actually increase brain reserve and reduce the risk of going on to suffer dementia in later life. So that for high-income countries, it's important to increase the rate of higher education and university education for the population as a whole. For low-income countries, it's important that everybody gets basic education, but it's important that all countries prioritise this for this reason. And it's important to understand that education is education for life, and that better educated people are more likely to absorb health messages and more likely to reduce their risk of cardiovascular disease, and that if you have an uneducated population, it's going to be resistant to those health messages. We need also to understand the important upstream determinants of adult cardiovascular risk, and that there's many things which are actually not within the domain of individuals to make their choices, but where national action by governments needs to be carried out in order to encourage individuals to make those choices. It's also never too late, and for older people, I think it's important to talk very directly about dementia prevention, because dementia, as we've heard from many speakers, is such an important concern for older people. There is evidence that stopping smoking, not getting diabetes or getting your diabetes detected and properly managed can have an important effect on your future risk of developing dementia. It may also be beyond smoking and diabetes that multi-component interventions like the finger trial that was recently published from Finland showing important benefits of overall active management of cardiovascular risk factors on rates of cognitive decline, that more trials of that kind, which we've heard at this meeting are underway, will indicate that there are wider benefits for example, reducing blood pressure as well as addressing other risk factors. We need to think about the possibility of the poly pill. This is a low-dose combination of thiazide diuretics, beta blockers, of statins to reduce cholesterol, plus or minus aspirin. It's incredibly cheap, and in a single pill that's conveniently taken once a day, everyone with elevated cardiovascular risk can be on one of these pills, can control simultaneously all of their risk factors, potentially could have a big impact, I think, on dementia incidence, and we need trials of that as well. So I think the other thing that we need to think about older people is we need to learn from Bandura's social learning, that messages spread through society in ways that are complex and difficult to understand. But one thing that we do know is that older people are authoritative individuals within many families and within many societies. So giving older people this message allows them to communicate this to younger people in such a way that actually changes health behaviors throughout society. Now, I think finally what I wanted to say is that the real way whether we're going to know whether the things that are happening in countries at the moment are really making a difference is not through randomized controlled trials, but it's by monitoring the dementia epidemic. And there's far too little of this going on. There's very few countries that have actually committed at governmental level to repeated nationally representative surveys of the prevalence of dementia or the incidence of dementia in order to understand what are the trends. And we've already heard that in some countries, particularly in the UK, the USA, some Scandinavian countries, we're already seeing possible signs of downward trends in the prevalence and incidence of dementia that may also be associated with improvements in cardiovascular health and improvements of levels of education in those countries. So it's a kind of a natural experiment. And in the cardiovascular disease field, this is what people have been doing for the last 30 or 40 years with studies like the WHO MONICA study. We need to have such national studies funded and in place in high-income countries, but in low-income countries as well. And I just wanted to alert everybody to what Yves Jonette mentioned about the fact that we haven't said nearly enough in this meeting about low and middle income countries. We can see from this slide that actually of the global distribution of incident dementia, nearly 8 million cases per year, nearly half of them are actually occurring in Asia. And the majority of those new cases of dementia that we want to prevent are going to be happening in low and middle income countries. And that's going to be increasingly the case over the next 50 years. While we're seeing a reduction in the prevalence of dementia in some high income countries, we're probably actually seeing a doubling of the prevalence of dementia over the last 20 years in China. That's a matter of great concern, and it's very probably linked to the fact that in China, alongside many other rapidly developing middle-income countries, we're actually seeing an unraveling of public health and a taking on of adverse cardiovascular risk factor behaviors with the globalization of these tendencies. And this needs to be highlighted and it needs to be addressed. And finally, just a slide from our own work with our 1066 Dementia Research Group in low and middle income countries, showing a very high prevalence of hypertension in the older population and a big range in the effectiveness of the public health system in detecting and controlling hypertension in those countries. Again, systematic action by governments is needed to address these problems, to strengthen these health services to do this work. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for your very strong message on the dementia prevention, that dementia is a preventative conditions. It's very good message, I think. And it's very regret to tell you that we don't have enough time to have a discussion in this session. But I believe that this session is really fruitful for understanding what's going on about the dementia prevention in the world and in any area. And also what we should do more for the prevention of dementia from a scientific aspect of, and also the improvement of care conditions. And finally, on behalf of the organization, I really appreciate all of the speakers and all of the participants in these sessions. Thank you very much.
ありがとうございました。
And thank you. Until 2:15, we'd like to have lunch break. Until 2:15, we'd like to have a lunch break. And topic 3 is the panelists please, by 2 o'clock, please, by 2 o'clock, come to the briefing room number 1. This is a housekeeping announcement. Those of you who will be participating in the excursion tomorrow, please stop by at the tour desk. And also the ID strap, you have the red and the blue. Those of you go to the 54th floor, the Hills Club for lunch. During the lunch time, on the screen, there will be the Kurumori Yasufuri-san's photography and also Cassie Greenbatch. These are the livelihood and the faces of the persons with dementia. Please enjoy.
またこの休憩時間で
And during the lunch break in the Sky Studio, is also an exhibition of robots, nursing care robots, which were touched upon during the session. And also in the conference room, there are poster exhibitions and the video footages of the citizens' activities. Please stop by during your break. We would like to resume and break until 2:15.
やれやれやれやれみんな言いたいことあるからしょうがないよねしょうがないよねそうそうそろそろだって
小3の頃からなぜだかおばあちゃんと暮らしてた
う